Good morning. Good morning. My name is Jim Smith, and I hold the office of an Assistant Governor for the Rotary District 6540, and I'm here this morning to introduce our District Governor. Rotary International's mission is to provide service above self. With over 1.2 million members in over 30,000 local clubs in 200 countries around the world, there are over 500 districts overseen by the Office of District Governor. It is my honor this morning to introduce our District Governor, who works with over 50 clubs in northern Indiana from the Illinois border to the Ohio border. Dr. Ranjan Kinney has a doctorate in Operations and Information. He served on the faculty of the University of North Carolina before joining Indiana University Northwest in Gary in 1990. He currently teaches at the School of Business and Economics at IU Northwest, where he is a professor of Management and Information Systems. Dr. Kinney's work in Rotary started in 1992 when he joined the Schererville Rotary Club. He has held positions on the local board of directors, served as president of that club in 2005, and in 1996 he volunteered to be on the district scholarship subcommittee, and since 1999 has been the chair of the District Foundation Scholarship Committee. He has served as an assistant governor, and in 1998 and 2005, during his university sabbaticals, Dr. Kinney received Rotary University teacher grants. In 1998, he taught in the graduate school at Bangkok University in Thailand, and in 2005, he taught at Universidad Adolfo Ibanez in Santiago, Chile. He's currently a member of the Rotarians on Social Networks Fellowship and is a past member of the International Computer Users Fellowship of Rotarians. Ranjan and his wife Nivi have 2 children, a daughter and a son, both in college. Both were active in Interact and both participated in the Rotary Youth Leadership Academy. Please give Governor Ranjan Kinney a warm welcome.
Like Jim mentioned, I'm Ranjan Kinney. Our district is 6540. There are 535 such districts around the world, and there are over 35,000 clubs in the world in Rotary International. I carry with me the welcomes of 2,500 members in 56 clubs in this district, all across northern Indiana. Many of your neighbors, friends, parents, and teachers are members of those Rotary clubs. Worldwide, there are 1.2 million Rotarians. You probably don't know, we started in 1905. Rotary started. And they're all committed to Rotary International's mission to build goodwill and peace throughout the world. An important focus of Rotary International and our District 6540 and your local Rotary clubs is you. That's you and your classmates. Your local Rotary clubs support scholarships, reading programs, school projects, anti-bullying and mentoring programs, child care, and food banks in your communities. Your local Rotary clubs in your hometowns offer you study opportunities at high schools in other countries to help you understand and find your place in this global society. We have programs to help you hone in on your leadership skills to make a difference in the world. We have Rotary Interact clubs for high school students, just like you, to carry out hands-on service projects in your community. So yes, we do care about you. You are our future. We want to help prepare you to take care of the world. That's why we are here today. That's why we sponsor the Rotary World Affairs Conference, so there is a better appreciation of global affairs among you. We have gathered 1,200 bright students, just like you, from across northern Indiana, from Valparaiso to Hammond, to Monticello and Goshen, to South Bend and Fort Wayne, that's where I'm right now, to North Manchester. Your town's Rotary clubs have been sponsoring this conference for more than a dozen years. Last year, you talked about immunizations. The year before, it was child slavery. You have learned about immigration, the global economy, climate change, outsourcing, all that and more important stuff. A key Rotary focus worldwide is clean water and health. As you learned today, health is crucially, imperatively linked to clean water. Those of you participated in the World Affairs Conference last year know that. You learned that diseases like polio, which is a primary goal for Rotary to eradicate, the second only disease in the world to be eradicated. Polio spreads swiftly through filthy water. Frankly, human life cannot happen without clean water. We simply die. You learn more about that today. At least 3,000 people or children die each day. Let me say it again, 3,000 children die each day from diseases caused by unsafe water. That is what motivates Rotary members around the world to build wells, install rainwater harvesting systems, and teach those community residents to sustain and how to maintain the new infrastructure. Yes, I am also talking about the country where I was born in, India, and about hundreds of other countries in the world. I'm also talking about right here in the United States, about Flint, Michigan, and Goshen, Indiana, and about rivers that run through your hometowns, about your water resources. It takes diligence and awareness and action to keep our water supply safe here and abroad. You'll learn about that today. You'll also learn that we can solve this crisis. It's not an impossible task. We have water. That's not the challenge. Challenge is how to clean it, how to keep it clean, how to access it, how to deliver it, and that is solvable. Rotary is part of that solution. Rotarians in this room have helped communities run clean, fresh water down mountaintops to communities. We are supporting many projects around the world from this district. And then they taught folks in those communities how to maintain their new clean water supplies. Sometimes our task is as simple as promoting hand washing and good hygiene habits among school children. There are projects in India right now going on, and they specifically focus on hand washing, clean water, and sanitation to keep the diseases away from the children. 100 years ago, the founder of Rotary International, Paul Harris, said, to paraphrase, individual effort, when well directed, can accomplish much, but the greatest good must necessarily come from the combined efforts of many. The power of combined effort knows no limitation. So hopefully we will be able to give some information today about water and how you can be part of it. Today we are talking about what you can do to provide clean water in your communities. and in faraway communities where children must walk hours for a sip of dirty water. We will talk about what is happening right here, right now in the United States, in Indiana, in Goshen, in Fort Wayne, in Gary, and probably some of your communities. Our keynote speaker is an expert in water quality and water management. Dr. Jane Frankenberger is the Water Quality Coordinator for Purdue University Cooperative Extension Service, which serves every one of your counties, every one of your hometowns. She works with Indiana communities and public water supply systems to protect water sources from contaminants and shows them how to manage drinking water quality. Dr. Frankenberger is a biological and agricultural engineer who is well regarded. She has worked at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. With a PhD from Cornell University, she also is a Purdue professor and author or co-author of more than 30 publications on water issues in Indiana, from drinking water testing and treatment to land use impacts on watersheds and water quality. Her research focuses on how pathogens, pesticides, and other pollutants are transported into our water systems. Many of your panelists today have collaborated with Dr. Frankenberger and the Purdue Cooperative Extension Service. Before joining the Purdue faculty, she led small-scale irrigation projects with women's cooperatives in northern Senegal. She also has served as a teacher in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but her focus today is on Indiana and your communities. We are thrilled that Dr. Frankenberger is here today with a speech tailored for this Rotary World Affairs Conference. We are grateful also that our expert panelists are spending their mornings with you today. They too believe these conversations you will have with them are extremely important. This day is for you. It's all about you. We hope you will make the most of it and carry the conversations you hear and participate in today back to your classmates and to your dinner tables. Rotary welcomes you. Please help me welcome Dr. Jane Frankenberger of Purdue University Cooperative Extension Service.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm really delighted to be here with you to talk about a substance that's vital to all of us, that we use and enjoy every day, and in fact makes up a large portion of our bodies. I'm talking, of course, about water. And what I'm going to talk about is how we need to both protect the source of the water and in order to be able to provide clean water for everyone. And so we'll just get right into it. So, you were coming to this today, but my question is, do you think much about water? When you wake up in the morning and, turn on the tap to brush your teeth, do you stop and wonder whether there will be any water or whether it might contain pathogens that could make you sick? Or do you stop and give thanks for the fact that you do have plenty of clean, safe water? My guess is that you probably don't do any of those because most of us don't. Sorry, get my, all right, it won't work. All right, because most of us don't. But because we are fortunate to have plenty of clean, safe water in Indiana, clean, safe, and abundant water. And so what I'm going to talk about today is what we, how we happen to have that and where people live that have less of that. Drinking water is what we often think of first, and when you heard this was about water, you probably thought first of drinking water, but it's by no means the only use for water, or the only reason we're so grateful for water. Our rivers, and lakes support ecosystems that are so important to all of us. Many of you probably like to fish, and of course, clean water is important for the fish. Water also has all kinds of cultural and religious importance. This is a baptism, which some churches do in rivers around here. I've been fascinated to find out. And it's something that's in the news right now. You may know about the tribal communities in North Dakota that are protesting over many things, but one of the reasons that they're very concerned about the pipeline is the potential to contaminate their most precious clean water, which is part of how they look spiritually at water. Water provides recreation. I'm sure many of you enjoy going to the Indiana Dunes or swimming at so many other places. Hopefully you've experienced the joy of just playing in a stream, finding the insects that live there, and building dams to move the water around, things like that. Water is critical for our industry that powers the economy, and in fact for generating the power itself, as this shows. The largest water user by far in Indiana is the power generation industry. The water is used to cool the generators. And water is vital for producing our food. Without that vital rainfall, we would not have the productive agriculture that we have. And it's reasonable that farmers expect, just like when you get up and expect the tap water to be there, farmers have had good reason to expect the rainfall to be there each year, which gives us our productive agriculture. So all in all, in Indiana, we've been fortunate to have very plentiful water. Here's the list of how much water we have, if anybody likes to write down numbers. I won't go through them, but rivers, streams, lakes, reservoir, our very wonderful Great Lakes shoreline, which is so well protected, our precious wetlands that protect the rest of the water, and groundwater. So we have much to be thankful for. But, of course, as you can imagine, I want to ask the question is, do we have reason to believe that that abundant, clean, safe, and water will be there in the future? As you grow up and take the reins of running things in the country, can we assume that the water will just be there? So today I want to talk about 3 places where they've encountered challenges where water hasn't been in there, and 3 ways that our system works to protect water, and then I'm going to end with 3 ways that you can make a difference. So we got 3 sets of 3s here, so we'll see how this goes. If you follow the news and what's happening with water in the news, I'm sure you know about the city where water has very tragically become a menace rather than a treasure, and that's the city of Flint, just over the border in Michigan. So imagine the experience of a family there. The parents work hard, they're people of modest means, but more than anything, they want what's best for their kids. But in 2014, the water started getting browner. They complained, they were told it was safe, the kids got sick, the kids had rashes. What's happening here? Is this the way things needed to be? Clearly they did not. And I'll come back to the system around that should be protecting the people of Flint and how we need to do better. Now let's think about a very different kind of community. Flint, Michigan is an urban community in a small town in Indiana, in which there are many. I'm thinking of one in particular. They don't have city water. Each house has a private well, and they pump the water up to get water. And in 2012, there started to be a drought, and a farmer nearby started to irrigate, and the family's water dried up. They got up in the morning, the well was having more and more trouble pumping the water, and eventually it was dry. This is a different kind of crisis. Here they weren't being poisoned by their water, there was simply no water. So what do you think of this kind of situation? Of course, we want water for our crops, but of course, people want water for their homes as well. The third place I want to look at briefly is Lake Erie and the city of Toledo, Ohio, which again, I hope that you've heard of because this was a very major public health crisis in 2014. Lake Erie, of course, is one of the Great Lakes. The water here in Fort Wayne flows towards Lake Erie, and the lake provides a wonderful place to grow up for kids to play in the family, as well as getting their drinking water. But over the last 10 years, there's been more and more problems with algae. And the water, instead of looking as it should, like clear and fresh, has been filled often, more times than we like, with algae. And until in 2014, it finally came about that the toxins that the algae produce intersected with where the city draws its water. And people woke up in the morning to be told that their water was toxic for a very different reason than Flint's. That's lead that had the potential to have long-term brain damage. This is one that's a neurotoxin and could harm people very quickly. And so they were told that they couldn't brush their teeth, they couldn't make coffee or anything else suddenly one day. And the families of Toledo, who had, just like all of us, gotten up every morning, turned on the water, and assumed it would always be abundant and safe and clean, suddenly felt like they were in a third world country, having to stand in long lines to get bottled water just to meet their basic needs. So that's three situations that I think paint kind of a background for how we might think about the way that we as a nation manage our water. And one of the reasons I wanted to mention this is because I hear that you're all, very bright people, some of the best high school students coming up and are thinking about careers. So these are some of the ways that people are working in the system to make sure that we do have clean water. And the three sort of broad categories that I'm going to talk about are the science and the engineering, which I'm sure many of you are interested in, and then individual actions that we can take, and some people think are the answer, but laws and regulations, which I think needs to be part of it. Now, in the opening talk, I hear that part of what Rotary believes, I tried to write it down, is that individual efforts can accomplish much, but together we accomplish more, or something like that. And I think that's one of the messages. Certainly, we all need to think about our individual actions, but there are many things like providing clean water that one person can't do by themselves. So we have to think of what we can do as a group, as a society. So the water treatment is without a doubt, one of the great engineering achievements of the 20th century. Okay, we're in the 21st century now, so it was achieved during the 20th century. Before that time, nobody could count on having safe and clean water when they wanted it. So it's been a phenomenal effort of the public health, the scientists, the chemists, and the engineers who create these systems that move the water through mixing, clarification, disinfection, et cetera. And I'm really glad that we're going to hear from somebody from the Fort Wayne Utilities today, because this is a great example of a wonderful system. So there continues to be a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunities and a lot of needs for bright people to work in this important field. But in Flint, we can obviously think back on the situation. So I'm jumping back to Flint now. What went wrong? Flint had the water treatment plant. They have a beautiful water treatment plant. And in fact, the water was getting treated for many things. But as you may know, the water was switched from getting it from Lake Huron and the Detroit water system to using the Flint River, which was more corrosive. And for reasons that I think are not completely clear, the chemicals that should have been added to control the corrosion were not added. So the very corrosive Flint River took the lead off the pipes, and because sadly so much of our nation still has lead pipes, and that got into people's drinking water. There's a long list of people who have some blame there, the people who were doing the testing, the people who saw the high results and didn't pay attention. But I bring it up here again because these were other scientists and engineers who finally brought the problem to light. When the family said, our water is unacceptable, we're scared, we don't know what's happening to our children, they went to scientists and engineers. It ended up being an engineer engineer at Virginia Tech who did some of the testing and said, yes, your water is so high in lead, it's a menace to your families and will continue to be for a time to come. So the message there is that we've accomplished a lot in water treatment, but people need to be vigilant and still follow the process. And there's so many things that have to work well together that we can't just sit back and assume all will be well. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to work in that industry. Besides the science and engineering, we have something that's called the Safe Drinking Water Act. And this is a very precious federal law. This is part of the reason that we should be giving thanks, because we have a federal law that's now, it was passed in the 1970s, and it protects public drinking water throughout the nation. And it's a combination of federal, so EPA sets the standards, decides what level is appropriate, is safe for the most part for most people. And then with the state agencies, it enforces that. So we can be thankful that it's there, and it does, for the most part, provide a framework that provides us with safe water. Obviously, sometimes things go wrong, as is the case of Flint. Now, there are a lot of lessons that are being learned from Flint and that we should take from this tragedy in Flint. But I want to mention one that should not be taken. A lesson we should not think that we're learning is that somehow bottled water or switching to some kind of private system is the answer. Water is a public good. It has to be provided to everyone. It can't just be provided to some people. It would be like saying the roads are bad, so let's have some kind of private road system that some people get to drive on and the other people have to drive on the roads with potholes. No, roads are a public good. They have to be there for everyone. So we as a nation made the decision decades ago that we would have safe drinking water for all. That's why I put the providing water for all in my title. It's not just for some. We need to have clean water for all. Bottled water is a short-term, emergency, temporary situation in a case like Flint. But the lesson we need is that we need to act collectively to make sure that everyone, in fact, has clean and safe drinking water. But I'd be glad to talk more about bottled water in the question period if you'd like. Now on to the small town where you remember the person, there was the irrigation system and the wells dried up. Is there a law that helped them? Several decades ago, more than 30 years ago, there wouldn't have been anything they could do. They would have just been at the mercy of the water going towards the large water user. But now we're fortunate that we have a law here in Indiana. This is different than most states. Every state has something, but ours is in fact very good. That if there's a major water user like an irrigator that harms a private well, they have to make it right. So in this situation, the private well owners, the homeowners, went to somebody from the Indiana Department of Natural Resources who investigates the situation. He's a hydrologist. And determined that yes, in fact, those wells did go dry due to the large water user, the irrigator, and so the irrigator has to compensate the private well owners. And so what they do is dig deeper wells. But I think it's a wonderful example of how our laws benefit making a level playing field. So without that, there wouldn't have been a good way to resolve that situation. I also brought up that situation in particular because, sadly, these are the kind of situations we expect to increase. Our climate is changing. We're having more and more long periods of drought. As the weather gets warmer in the summer, the crops have more evapotranspiration, and there will be more droughts in the future. So this situation of not having enough water is fortunately not very common in Indiana, certainly not in Fort Wayne where you have the abundant water of the Maumee River. But in places in Indiana, there are starting to be stresses in the system, and that's something that we as a society as a whole need to think about how to deal with. And so our final situation was back to Lake Erie. Now, here is a situation where we don't just want clean water to drink. The families who live there, and everyone in Ohio, wants the whole lake to be clean. We don't want a lake that's full of algae and we just treat the water down so that there's just good drinking water, but still we can't swim in the lake. So this gets to be a tougher situation. And scientists who have studied this, and this has been studied very extensively, say that the solution needs to be to reduce phosphorus, which is a nutrient, a fertilizer input, into the lake. And so this is a very large watershed that comes back all the way to Fort Wayne. So here in Fort Wayne, you are having an effect on Lake Erie. So what can be done? Well, the law that goes to work now here is the Clean Water Act. So this is another important federal law that was put in place during the same time, just after Earth Day in 1970. And it's, for the first time, set the goal that all the waters of the United States should be fishable and swimmable. Before that, and you can ask your grandparents about that, it was just sort of assumed that rivers could just be sewers. You could just throw stuff in, and even though it was a bad thing to do, nobody could stop you, and the industries could put whatever they wanted in there. But this, for the first time, said, no, our rivers are a treasure. They should be swimmable, they should be safe for swimming, and we should be able to eat the fish that comes out of them. Now, we haven't accomplished that goal altogether, but we've made tremendous progress, and I won't go into too much history there, but there's such a rich history of the progress that has been made since the Clean Water Act was passed in the 70s. The foundation of it says nobody has a right to discharge into a water of the US. You need a permit. So that hasn't solved all the problems, but it's made a big difference. The catch, and the reason that we're not further than we are, is because the word discharge, you think you know what it means, but actually it just means a point source discharge. And what's a point source? Well, it's usually something that comes out of a pipe. It's something that we can see. It's something that's regulated in the Clean Water Act. So sewage treatment plants and industry have made tremendous changes due to the Clean Water Act. I just sort of have an aside in the third bullet there that in Indiana we do still have something called combined sewer overflows. I won't talk about them much, but we do have some of the highest rate in the nation of places where raw sewage still goes into our rivers, sadly. But for the most part, these systems have really been cleaned up. What's the reason that our lakes and rivers aren't clean yet is because of a category called non-point source pollution. That means that its exact location is not easy to identify. We can't go out and see a pipe. The biggest examples are agriculture and to some extent urban runoff. And the reason that there's still problems, it would be very difficult to regulate it. And in fact, it's not regulated. And so now, because the other sources have been cleaned up, it's the greatest source of impairment. So there's a lot of research that is showing how the water problems in Lake Erie and then in Toledo are linked very closely to agriculture throughout the Maumee watershed. And you know the Maumee, right? Starting here in Fort Wayne, actually starting with the St. Joseph and the St. Mary's, but much more is evident in Ohio. And so that's where my work comes in. So this is really where I spend most of my time, although I give extension on the rest of water quality. But I conduct research along with many others on how agriculture is impacting our water quality and what we can do to reduce that. Now, if some of you know agriculture a little bit, you know what you're seeing here. This is, in fact, the most important pathway, where most of our water goes. It goes into something called tile drains. So below many of our fields, there's a sort of network of plumbing that is where a lot of the water goes. And we've known for decades that these tile drains pick up a lot of nitrate from the farm fields and empty it out into the streams directly. What's become clear more recently is that this is also how phosphorus is getting there. Not all of it, but that it's a very important source for tile drains. So this is the problem that scientists understand the problem now, but what are we going to do about it? Because these sources are not regulated at all through the Clean Water Act, we are reliant on voluntary actions and cost share and financial incentives for people to change. So I've just listed a few of them here. I could give talks, and I do often for hours, on the different practices that can help with treating phosphorus. One of the things you can do is change the drainage system. Instead of having a narrow ditch, we actually allow the drainage to go back up onto a floodplain. You may have seen ditches like this where some treatment can occur because these benches can have vegetation that can take up some of the water. So it's a new kind of drainage that will improve the situation. A new idea that we're working on is saying maybe we actually need to store some of the agricultural runoff in ponds and recycle it back under the field through irrigation. hopefully you know that whenever there's a new development put in, a big box store, a parking lot, they need to put in a retention pond, right? The water doesn't go directly into the river or the stream, it goes into a pond first. I'm sure you've seen those around town. So can we do something like that in the agricultural world, where the water from our cropland goes into a reservoir and then is pumped back? So that's what I'm working on now with colleagues from throughout the Midwest, of systems where we can capture the water in a pond and then feed it back into the system through some kind of irrigation. This won't happen fast. There's a lot of research that's to be done, but I just wanted to sort of say this is where we're going, of looking at ways that the water system can be changed. I also lead a network of research sites across the whole Midwest, and I think this is where we have a lot of hope that not just, we have a few ideas in Indiana, people have more ideas in Ohio and more in Minnesota and North Dakota, and so we're working together to combine our research so that the field measurements, this is from a site in Ohio, they're measuring with and without a new practice. We're looking at the soils, this is in a South Dakota site, this is in our, where we're measuring water at Davis Purdue Ag Center, which is about 100 miles to the south of here in Randolph County, down by Muncie. And I just show you this, if you're at all interested in research, there's so much more to be done, and there still will be when you go on and finish college. We collect thousands of data points, in fact, millions of data points, because we need that much data to really understand what's changing. If we change this part of the system, what's changing downstream? It's a very complicated system. Every system is different. Every year is different. So a lot of data need to be put together to understand both the current impact and how we can reduce it through making changes. So I'm going to close, it looks like I'm in good time here, with the 3 things that you can do to protect water. So this hopefully has given you a big picture of some of the crises that have already happened and that we're sure to see more of in the future. The big picture of how society manages water. We need more science and engineering. There's opportunities for folks like you there. We need more individual actions and ways that society can encourage the best. There's opportunities there. And we certainly need to strengthen our laws so that we have a better system in place. So we'll talk about three ways, and this will be brief. The first one is simply to be informed. So you are here, that's the first step. And I'm excited because I understand that you're some of the brightest students and you have such an impact to make. I thought of a couple of suggestions. I will also say that I was glad to see this publication, which some of us wrote way back in 2002, which I believe is before many of you were probably born, or at least you were quite young at that time. But it does give a lot of information about the water in Allen County. You can see where it's from, where it goes. You can see some ideas for getting involved. And, but what I wanted to suggest more closer to home is get involved by looking at something called a water footprint calculator. Where is your greatest source of water? Because I find that most people guess wrong. Maybe you think about to yourself, where do you think, what part of your life uses the most water? It may surprise you to know that for most of us, it's meat consumption. That's what the calculators tell us. It's so water intensive to raise the grain that goes to the livestock and through the whole system that one of the greatest ways we can reduce our water consumption is to reduce our meat consumption. So that's something for you to think about. Another thing I really encourage you to do is think about where your community's water comes from. Anyone who's on city water receives a report from the water supplier, and I think our speaker from the Fort Wayne City Utilities can talk about that. This information is not hidden. You can easily find out where your water comes from. Think about it. Is it at risk? Is there anything that you as citizens can do? So those are a couple ideas, but there's way more things that you can find out to be informed. The second broad suggestion that I want to give you is to be responsible. This is where we act as individuals, and we need to. It's true that collective action does more, but lots of people doing individual action does a lot. So once you're informed and you've figured out what your water footprint is, then reduce it. Take actions. Can we change our diet? Can we move to tap water from bottled water? Can we change what we consume? The production of clothes uses up a lot of water. So a lot of people are doing research to understand the whole life cycle of the things we buy and how water plays a role in that. You can also keep things clean. You can keep your streets clean and not litter. All those affect water as well. And the last one that I want to leave you with then is to be involved. And I think this is something we're all thinking about. I hope you are during this week of our election. Hopefully some of you were involved before the election. Now that our election has finished, I would say now more than ever, we need to be involved as citizens. Because if we just step back and assume that our elected officials are going to do everything right, we know that that's where our society has problems. Democracy requires active engagement from all of you. I'm just going to put up again the photo from the tribal communities that are protesting in North Dakota. You may have different views about that, but one thing is for sure, they are involved, and they're a great example of being engaged citizens. So I'll close with this. Again, I was so pleased to be able to share some ideas about water, the being thankful for what we have, and how to keep it available to all by protecting the sources that are so important to having water in Indiana. Thanks. Now, do I have time?